He asked them to join, and he didn't have to beg. Smiling, they wrote his lie. The fact that they're smiling when they do it, when they write the lie, emphasizes that the recruiters are quite culpable here. They've done the wrong thing as well, emphasizes that crime. And the colon here after the word lie also works to emphasize that crime. Mentioning here what didn't motivate him, all the things we think of as decent reasons, saying that that didn't motivate him, it's also emphasizing the silliness of the reasons he did join. He thought he'd look nice in the uniform, and he'd, get leave and pay and all of that kind of stuff. And the word fear here as well, that's capitalized. So fear is personified by being capitalized. It's a proper noun, which emphasizes its importance. Then we have here, when he's talking about why he did join, so we have the smart salutes, which uses alliteration not just of the S sound, which I've underlined, but also the T, so smart and salutes. It sounds very ordered and almost like marching, which is what drew him to join up in the war, was feeling that kind of ordered and not chaotic thing, which is contrast to what it was really like. Here, young recruits again highlights the fact that they were young, the men that were drafted were young. And soon he was drafted out with drums and cheers. So we have drums and cheers that we're drafting out with, similar to that sports imagery that we had at the beginning, and then repeated here. So some cheered him home, but not as crowds cheer a goal. So we have this repetition of this word cheer to create the contrast between when you cheered at a football match and he didn't receive just as much cheers, even though he arguably had a greater achievement in the war and he'd sacrificed far more for it. And here this word some is used. Well, that contrasts to the word that we had earlier when we had all. We had all the women touching him like a queer disease. Now we have some, so it's only some people who are cheering him at all. And only a solemn man who brought him fruits. Only one person stood there and brought him fruits and thanked him and then inquired about his soul. So thanked here is in italics because that kind of questions it. That's saying, is it a genuine thing that this person's saying? Is the statement genuine? And then inquired about his soul suggests to us that this is a homecoming minister. So this is someone whose job it is to thank the soldiers when they come home and then ask if their soul is all right. But it also is this death imagery. This religious minister, this question about his soul, is a bit of a, your soul, people think of your soul as the last thing that lives when your body is dead. So it's almost as if he's at his own funeral with a minister there, maybe thanking him for his life. The other thing about this word soul is it's contrasted to his lamenting the loss of his body and of his limbs. Then we have this word in this next stanza, now. Now is absolute as well. So like all, it's an absolute word. It's not a possibility that this is how he's going to spend the rest of his life. This is definitely how he's going to spend the rest of his life. He will spend a few sick years in institute, which is more of that sickness imagery, like the queer disease that we had in stanza 1, or 2, or 1, or whatever it was, and do the things that the rules consider wise, and take whatever pity they may dole. These words show that he has this lack of control. So he's going to do whatever the rules tell him to, and he'll take whatever people will give him, the pity that they will give him, because he's no longer an active young man. He's relying on others. And we have this repetition here. Tonight he noticed how the women's eyes passed from him to the strong men. So we have this repetition again at the end of the women paying no attention to him. He's no longer a potential lover to them. He's only someone that they care for. And we have this, them caring for him down here. So they're passing from him to the strong men that were whole. So this word is quite confronting to the reader, and it's quite emotive that he's not a whole person. His identity and his body have been fractured. And it also reminds us of half his lifetime up here, where he's lost half his life. So he's lost half, so he's no longer whole. Then we have this word here, how cold and late it is. Word cold, again, is some of our imagery of temperature, which we'd had earlier, where he's shivering, and contrast to the warmth of the women's hands. So he's very cold now. And then we have this series of rhetorical questions. Why don't they come and put him to bed? Why don't they come? Again, he's asking for that care. Where are the carers? Why aren't they coming? The other thing we can see these last two lines as is a metaphor. We can see it to mean a sort of death again, and more death imagery, because we're talking about something being cold, which often reminds us of death, and late as a time. So we know that he's waiting for dark, he's waiting for night. That can be a metaphor for waiting for death. So he's waiting for the lateness to come. And why doesn't it come? Why doesn't it come? He's almost death, and asking when death is going to come and put him to bed. So the things to notice in the poem Disabled include the contrast between the past and the present, the imagery of colour and temperature that's used all the way through the poem, so the cold, the shivering and the warm, and the use of women as representative of the way this soldier has lost his masculinity, the constant mention of women, the use of sports imagery and contrasting that with war, the stanza where he's thanked as well. The shortness of that stanza suggests it's really short-lived and not that a big of a deal in terms of the rest of his life and how that turns out. Also, don't forget to do your whisk.